Crazy! Hey, are you crazy? So this is Indy, and in my bug out bag video you guys have met my cat Juniper, and now you're cold because you were running through the water, and we have gotten caught up in the weather today. We underestimated the amount of rainfall that we were going to get, even though we did check the weather forecast. But anyway, we found this wonderful rock shelter that we can wait out the worst rain in. And I'm going to go through a couple other options for natural shelters. For if you get caught in the wilderness, in a rainstorm, or the weather turns bad, you do have some natural shelters as options. Doggy, come on, straight ahead. Come on. The reason why a rocky outcrop like this is a good shelter is because it's not always inhabited by other animals, and there's no animal droppings around here, but it still gives us some really good shelter from most of the sides. There's a nice open part here with a pretty view. And if the wind was coming from this direction, then it might not have been ideal, but because there isn't much wind today, this is actually perfect for us. There are other options for shelters around here. There are some caves up ahead. That definitely looks like another shelter. Okay, Indy says it is. Oh. A bit of good bashing to get into it. Oh, good doggy, good find, doggy. Wow, that is pretty big. And the ocean. Look at that roof. So this is another example of a natural shelter that you can look out for in the wilderness. And this is an Eolian cave, or a wind cave, and it's formed by the wind blowing sand and dust and moving all the small particles over a long period of time. And it forms these great big caverns, and they're like shelves as well. Per definition, this is not an actual cave. A cave is, first of all, a cavity in the earth that is big enough to accommodate a human, and secondly, it needs to have an entrance that is smaller than the actual cave itself is deep. Now, because this cavity or this rock shelf has such a wide entrance, it doesn't actually qualify as a cave per definition, but it'll still make a great natural shelter. The disadvantage of a hole in the rock like this is that it's got such a big opening. If the wind is blowing in from the cavity side or from the opening side, you're actually going to get so much of the elements blowing in right on top of you. But if you could find something like this on a windless day like today, and it gives you a bit of shelter from the rain, you're good to set up a camp in this cave. Caves and rock shelters have a microclimate, and what that means is within that space the climate stays relatively consistent. So even in cold days you'll find that the cave inside can be quite warm, and on warm days it will stay relatively cool, and that should save you from the elements. Example of a sea cave. There's quite a bit of water dripping down here. So not an ideal shelter from a dry perspective. And the dangers with sea caves is if the tide is coming in, you might actually end up being below the high water mark and your cave will get flooded. So it's really dangerous to actually choose a sea cave as a shelter. However, throughout history, people have actually used sea caves as shelters. So even though I'm way above the high water mark, in order for me to get out of this area, I need to cross a part where the ocean will definitely flood the land. And getting up these cliffs is not going to be an easy task. So it's really important to check what time the tides come in and go out, and make sure that you don't get trapped in an area like this. Moving into uncharted territory here, hoping to find a cave. So this is the kind of stuff you want to look out for when finding a cave. Any kind of droppings will indicate to you that there is another animal who lives in this cave. And you can see it goes quite far down, all the way in there. But we don't really want to share our caves with the animals. Whenever going into caves or exploring caves, make sure that you've got a couple of safety boxes ticked. First of all, never go into a chamber of caves without knowing exactly how to get out. And if it's dark, take a rope with you and tie the rope somewhere to the entrance so that you can find your way back. Secondly, never enter a dark cave without having a light with you so that you can at least see. And then a couple things about caves. Sometimes caves can emit gases that come from deep underneath the surface of the soil and of the cave. And you can check whether there are any gases by lighting a match and holding it near the entrance of the cave to see what happens to the flame. If there's no oxygen and there's carbon dioxide being emitted from the entrance of the cave, then your match will go out almost immediately. If your match continues to burn, then there's some oxygen and the air is possibly safe to breathe inside the cave. The disadvantage of caves like this one is that it's very likely to be inhabited by bats, and in their droppings there are viruses that can make us very ill. So the ideal is to actually find a cave that there is no sign of any other animals. If you're going to utilize it, make sure it's easy to get in and out of, well ventilated, and that you can't get lost in it. But let's take a look in it anyway. Before entering, make sure that there aren't any animals on the ground or hanging from the ceiling like snakes or scorpions or venomous spiders that can actually injure you or harm you. So be very careful when you go in. Check the top, check the bottom, and check the walls to make sure that it's safe to enter. That is a big cavity. Doesn't look like there's anything on the floor. No bats hanging around. No venomous animals around. So I think it's safe to enter. How is that for you? Come through small spaces into much larger ones. So this is an example of a scree cave or a talus cave where the rocks have fallen in and created this sort of cavern and a cavity underneath them. And it's actually not the best place to find shelter either, because you never know when there's going to be another rockfall or a shift in the rocks. So it can be quite dangerous to find shelter in scree caves or under rock shelters, because you never know when there's going to be movement in the rocks again. Come on, Indy, let's get out. So we've explored some great natural shelters now, and I hope that this has given you some pointers for the kinds of natural shelters to look out for in the wilderness if you're bugging out. Remember to subscribe and let me know where you guys are watching from, and until the next time, live well.